Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. So another physicist Michael response video. This is his second video explaining how relativity doesn't have a problem conserving both momentum and kinetic energy, which seems very unrealistic. And the explanations are sort of I would argue, evasions of the basic subject, which is the problem created by this idea that it takes 4 times the force to go 10 miles an hour that it takes to go 5 miles an hour. And to go 3 times as fast, it takes 9 times the force. So that's the fuel, essentially. So you could see that on a fuel meter. Now, the whole point of relativity is that this ship could be going 50 miles an hour or it could be going 170,000 miles an hour. And theoretically, there's no way to tell from inside the ship, blah, 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 blah. And there aren't supposed to be any real giveaways. Clearly, though, relativity kind of fails in this circumstance because observers might not understand how fast something's going, but that doesn't change a fuel register. So you can't look from the wrong perspective. A different perspective isn't going to make you think the fuel gauge can read a different number. It's either reading 9 or 7 or whatever, and that's what it reads. It can't read a different number from a different location. So there really can't be any mystery about how fast something's going, because you can tell when it increases its speed. So anytime it accelerates, it'll be giving away the answer because you can see how much fuel it's using, because the more it's accelerating, the more fuel it uses. So that's the simple explanation. And there's lots of catches to make this. People will argue that as the mass decreases as it uses its fuel, but we know theoretically you could use a nuclear fuel or even photons, and the amount of mass is infinitesimally small compared to the weight of the ship, and it would never be an issue of changing any dynamic because you change the mass. You could also feed the fuel from some other source, and therefore the fuel wouldn't be diminishing. You could have like a hose to a big fuel tank, and everything could be running on those hoses. And the problem would be real. How much fuel it was using, it would be read on a scale, and it would have to be, the relativity argument would have to go away because these numbers can't lie. If you're going faster and faster, it has to read a certain amount. For how fast you're going will be a certain amount of fuel. And so no matter how fast it's going, I can just tell how much fuel it is by how much its velocity increased. And that'll tell me how much, because I'll know how much fuel for that much velocity increase. So it kind of makes a mess of this idea that there's no absolute or real speed, that things really have to, because of the kinetic energy theory, have to have a real speed. If it was all momentum and all you did was double, then there's not a problem. If it's 2, 3, 4, 5, if the amount of fuel is consistent with how much velocity you get, then it doesn't matter whether you're going from 10 miles an hour to 15 or 15 to 20. So the difference between 9 and 16 is 7. The difference between 4 and 9 is 5. There's a huge difference. The difference between 1 and 2 is 3. So for each one, there's a bigger difference in how much fuel you're going to use to go that velocity. So it's all a signature of an actual velocity. You can't say it doesn't have an actual velocity because it's going to use a real amount of fuel, and that real amount of fuel tells you what the velocity had to have been, what the increase was, how fast you were going to use that much fuel to go some amount faster. So no matter how fast I leave this other ship, it'll be a direct signature. Just looking at the fuel gauge will tell me exactly how fast both of us are going previous to him accelerating. That's the real paradox, is that from different perspectives, this ship has to have a real velocity. because it's going to use a real amount of fuel to increase its velocity. I probably don't need to say much else. So the rest of the, his whole video was just more of the mathematics, and there's no real accounting for the paradox that kinetic energy does reveal unique numbers for unique velocities. So every velocity is going to use a different amount of fuel. Every change from one velocity to a higher velocity uses a different amount of fuel. So 10 to 12 is a different amount than 17 to 19. And you can just go through the whole range, and the fuel consumption will give away the velocity. Alright, so I think that's enough on that. And so I think it's just kind of an evasion that kinetic energy does present a problem for relativity theory. And frankly, I think relativity is dismissible for lots of other reasons beyond just the casual relativity. It doesn't destroy the existence of an absolute universe. But certainly if you include kinetic energy theory, it does basically dictate that there has to be real velocities, that there can't be, you can't see the amount of fuel being used as different from any different perspective. It always has to look like the same amount of fuel being used. Alright, just for the bringing it up, it has been like 9 days since the lever video, and I'm a little surprised there's been no follow-up on that. So he's posted, 2 40-minute videos, 40 plus, on this kind of obscure subject, and nothing on the big, the more important, I would argue, issue of conservation of momentum by gears and levers and hydraulic systems. And, well, that's not a great view, frankly. It's always something. I don't know why I guess the light went off. There, back on. Alright, so it always is something. There's nothing. No day can go perfectly fine. It's always got to be some kind of crap. But anyway, not your problem. I'm sure you experience much the same. So I don't think there's anything else. Yeah, just be good to get to this lever stuff, and I can just make more and more kinetic energy arguments about how it just doesn't make any sense. But whatever. We'll get to that later, I guess, eventually, as appropriate and such. Yeah.